All right, let's get stuck in. So we've got some fun things on the radar. We've actually got quite a few things from people within the community, which is cool. And so some recent releases, one by Windblown, Vagrant, and Lazarus, and Thomas Heitler, who did the illustration for my profile picture, and also some editing from Joan Lennon. So pronunciation key here, and who has aptly been named Granny the Night, which I just love that name. It sounds like it's someone straight out of like Snatch or something like that. So what is Hex Crawling the Void? So the blurb here: the universe ended long ago, but don't worry about that. There's still a profit to be made. Hex Crawling the Void is a spaceship hex crawl troop play system for Mothership. Is that troop or trope? Be the downtrodden asset and the corporate arsehole commanding the ship. Enable your players to act out their worst capitalists' impulses on the ship's poor, unfortunate crew before hitting them with the karmic consequences as they play poor gig workers sent into the reactor core to restart the engines. And we've got some great art from Thomas. You'll be able to recognize some of the style here. So you can create void sectors of dangerous space full of derelicts to pillage, outposts to patronize, and that should be patronize, not patronize, and artifacts to plunder with this hex creation tool. But yeah, loving this art. So cool. Very, very cool. And some other interesting things is that they're planning at this point in time to do some... Yes, that's right. Thomas, he drew my profile picture for the channel and in other places as well. So as part of Hex Crawling the Void, they're planning to do some mini expansions, including Captains of the Void, a source book of horrible captains, which sounds quite fun. Bylaws of the Void, a rules supplement for those players who want their board meetings to be more like Mafia or Werewolf. Outposts of the Void, a rules supplement of a wild and weird outposts for players to exploit for profit. Factions of the Gateway Station, a source book of gnarly criminal activity and faction play. Artifact Containment Procedures, a rules supplement to help with keeping those pesky reality-bending artifacts under control-ish. And the Tempest Nursery, a starting sector for your players to begin their adventures in capitalism. So this is really, really cool. I kind of wish there was a little bit more that they added about what the game is, I would say, because just like with campaigns in Mothership, you have some scenarios and you might use modules and all that sort of stuff, and you go out, and as you can imagine, within this hex crawl, there are aspects of it where you would go into ships, stations, etc. But there's something also a part of this, so I'm not too sure if it's exactly about this or whether it's one of their expansions, but there is the idea of having these two, almost like playing two sets of playable characters, for lack of a better way of putting it. Playable characters that go on the missions and they try and execute whatever the board has told them, but there's some mechanics around how the board works itself. And so I'm hoping to talk to Windblown, Vagrant, and maybe Lazarus as well, to hopefully might be at our next meetup or another meetup, depending on if it works out, and that he can showcase this, talk about it, how it works, and things like that. So that will be part of a community meetup in the near future. And so that will be announced when that would happen. and it would be great to see some people there and ask them questions about how it works, because there are some really interesting mechanics that don't just make it like, okay, here's a hex crawl and design a map. It's far more than that. It's a really, really cool thing. And of course, like the hex crawl is like a nice way of generating a sector, but it is far more than that. And as you can see from the, like these mini expansions that they got planned, there's a whole lot of stuff that would be more from this like toolkit and also a way of playing within that sector, whatever you might end up creating as well. So that is Hex Crawling Void, so Windblown Vagrant is part of the community. So is Lazarus, has contributed to this as well with map sims by Lazarus. So it's really great to see people doing things at the moment, and we'll be seeing plenty more of that probably over the next wee while, which is cool. All right. So another thing from our community, let me see, we're all belters, so the grungy room spaces. Yeah. Yep. It's going to be really interesting. Like, I'm not going to do it just here, but it had some really interesting mechanics where it wasn't just about going and being characters and exploring derelicts. It was actually the decision making for going out and having some game mechanics for that, where it's like, okay, well, we all vote to go and do this particular mission, but it's, instead of it just being, okay, I vote, and because I want to do it as a player, it was more like, okay, there are some mechanics around being a board member and the best for the company, trying to profit maximize in a way, as far as I know. And the people that you might play, the people that you, or characters that you play in session, are the unfortunate people who have to execute those orders from the board. So yeah, sounds like a lot of fun, to be quite honest. Another one from the community is Solar VAULT INFERNO, and this is one from, I always love saying this name because I screw it up all the time. So published by Ominous Anomaly, and this is Chris Rozvadovsky, who is also in the community. I believe it was his friend who did the writing, design, and art for it, and he helped out with editing and published it here on itch. So this is something that has just been released, and the blurb for this is that for Solar Inferno is that survive corporate treachery in a thrilling fiery tower escape, racing to the top before Solar Vault Theta 6 is completely consumed by a raging star. After a series of missions for an inscrutable employer, the crew are mysteriously called to a remote station for their debriefing. As the facility is rocked by several violent impacts, the elevator doors slam shut and the company executives initiate extreme measures to ensure that all loose ends are tied. Will the crew burn amid the deadly chaos or ascend ahead of the rising smoke to catch the final life pod? So yeah, this is a trifold, as far as I'm guessing. And they're various, is it trifold? Yes, pamphlet and venture. And so, yeah, I'd be really interested to see how this all gets packed in, because it talks about having like 14 levels of events, and it's great for like a 1 through 3 session adventure. Sounds like a lot of fun. And as you can imagine, some like escalating crisis phases with obstacles and things like that. So it sounds like a lot of fun. And this, as well as some other bundles, are part of a bundle that Chris has under the name of Ominous Anomaly at the moment as well. So, yep, Chris is in our community as well. You might have seen him pop up a couple of times. And this is something that is under his sort of like publishing name. All right. Next. So I've mentioned heat signature on here before, and if you don't already know, heat signature is this great zine. I think it's 40, maybe 50 pages, which is published here by Void Inc. in our, and he is also in our community as well. Yeah, so Heat Signature is a weapon expansion for Mothership. And so what he has just released is there is a inventory system that was put in Heat Signature. And what he's done is like basically carved that off so that that is a free or pay what you want, I believe. Yep. For the inventory system. And there's also a sample of the first 15 pages of Heat Signature. So that's almost like a third of Heat Signature right there. And yeah, it's definitely worth a look. And I'm sure Void Inc. would appreciate anyone who took some looks at it. And so to give you a bit of a clue, so they have, here are some examples of some of the, like, the guns. So this is a firearm, handgun, name, blurb, and then also specs about the gun as well. So you can see that gives it a bit of a class. So if you have some classification of how, your equipment and how much people can carry, so it gives you some guidance on that. Price, of course, range, so some of the normal things. And then in Heat Signature, along with firearms, there's a whole lot of attachments to the weapons as well. And then also there's some like quite cool special actions that you can do with guns in the heat of combat. What else we've got here? And then, here's a bit more about the inventory system. So it talks about, okay, here are some, like the capacity for a character and makes it a little bit easier. And I think, if I'm correct, and I'm willing to be corrected here, is that I think he created a PDF that you could actually fill it out, like basically toggle that these are the spaces that are taken up by all of my equipment. And so that's definitely worth checking out, even if you're just looking at like a way of doing different inventory in Mothership. And then, of course, for the preview of Heat Signature. And something that's coming up soon for Void Inc. is releasing this supplement called Cold Storage, which I am sure we'll hear about in the near future. I'm pretty sure he's told me, to be honest. So we'll give it justice when I can actually remember what exactly Cold Storage is about. But like I said, it is pay what you want. And Void Inc. is also in our community, which is cool. Really nice to see people. Something else that has come out recently. What are your thoughts on damage outside of post-survival? Oh, in terms of... Okay, that's a good question. So Peter asks, what are your thoughts on damage and range on weapons outside of the player survival guide? I think generally I'm pretty flexible with it. I think, as long as it doesn't get out of control or a bit silly, and I sort of think about if someone, say for example, someone said, oh, I want to bring some like custom weapon, then I think I would be looking at, okay, well, how does it compare to other weapons that are in this game already? Does it fit within the range of damage? So is it 4d10 or less? Of course, sure, there's like the laser, is it the laser cutter that has like 1d100 or whatever? But if it's like 14 or less, then it's like, okay, cool, that's not a huge problem. And then it would be, what other things do you have to consider with weapons? Yeah, I think as long as it's comparable, I think once it starts getting a little bit weird about like, okay, this weapon has like, I know in Heat Signature, he introduces something about like different types of rounds as well, different types of ammunitions. So I think it would really be just making sure that that balance is there, as well as it makes sense for that character to have that thing. Yeah. So that's how I would think about it. Yeah, exactly, Peter. So Peter says we do a sniper rifle 4d10, disadvantage at close range, but pistol versus revolver. Revolver, we give a +1 damage to the roll. Yeah. So things like that, I think, are that they make sense mechanically for that type of weapon. And I think the only thing that I would really worry about is if it starts getting like, okay, this is clearly kind of like outside any of the weapons that are within the player survival guide, and it makes them just really overpowered, and that it's not just like a one-off. So there might be certain like missions, or I think even modules that have weapons or things that can do a lot of damage. Then that's usually just like that one session, and it's like, well, do they actually get to keep it afterwards or not? That's kind of up to you, but yeah, you have to be a little bit wary. As long as it's within that range of damage, I think that's the biggest thing for me. And also thinking about if it's going to do like multiple things. Yeah, well, yeah, your Clive Shetty / lightsaber. Yeah, exactly. But in saying that, that's a melee only weapon, right? So that restricts like how much damage it can do. And also enemies have a way of protecting themselves from it as well. So, yeah. But that's generally how I would think about it. I don't think about it too hard. As long as it's within that range of damage, then I'm kind of happy. And that it doesn't like give some other crazy advantage to people. Like where they have like multiple shots for some reason, or it like does like massive piercing damage or stuff like this. Is like, yeah, I'd probably be more likely to push back on that sort of stuff. All right, so in another thing that has come up, which is a recent Kickstarter, which is Redshift, and this is a gothic horror one-shot for Mothership. And the one-liner, I guess, here is Earth's first solar extrasolar colony ship has been found after 3 centuries in space. What ancient and bloody horrors lurk aboard? Well, on board, I should say. So 300 years ago, during an intense but brief wave of revolutionary fervor, 1,000 of Earth's richest and most paranoid people entered deep cryosleep and fled aboard the Ceres. The ship was never heard from again until now. Earth's first extrasolar has been located drifting far off course and headed towards a dead star. Your mission: board the Ceres, assess the situation, extend the company's resettlement offer to any survivors. But what older, bloodier terrors, oh my god, terrors may lurk? Imagine if it was just terriers, just bloodied terriers just running around. So, yeah. So that is Redshift. And this is Kickstarter that began a few days ago, I think, and will end in early May. But yeah, this art is great. I love this art. It's really, really cool. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the art for Orphans, maybe? Or maybe the Nobody Wake the Bugbear version of like their, what would it call, like thumbnail for Orphans. But I really love like this face appearing within like the stars. I really love that. Year of the Dog, yeah. Exactly. Well, we've already got one module called Year of the Rat, so it would be the next logical thing, right? But yeah, I wanted to show that so the link's in the description as always, and people can go take a bit of a look and poke around, see what people are doing, and this looks like it could be quite cool. Okay, all right, so exciting news. There's a couple of jams that I think people from the community are likely to be involved in. The first one, which is Mothership centric, is this one here, which is Triptech Jam 3, Spring 2026. Yes. Yeah. That's one thing about the messages is that, yes, they are a bit delayed. Something that we have to put up with, I guess. Yeah, don't be afraid of commenting, by the way. Hopefully I'll be able to get the context. We've talked about that before, Peter. But yeah, that's also a bit of a, how would you say? It's a bit of like a puzzle for me to figure out what you're exactly talking about. That's all good. So this next I wanted to talk about is the Triptech Game Jam 3 Spring 2026 edition. So this is running from April 18th to May 9th. And this is something that I briefly mentioned a few weeks ago, I think. And it is something that in previous of these game jams have created some really cool modules. So there's been stuff, I think it's like what reflects from within, I think, which is one made by the same person who made Akigata, which is Dot. But if you look at some of the past game jams, I'm pretty sure you'll recognize some great modules that you probably know. G'day, Al, how are you? Nice to see you. So, important things. So, the game jam starts in just over a week, and it will run until the 9th of May. And it looks like the theme will come out on the 18th as well. And it's your opportunity to like collaborate on what you don't necessarily have to do it by yourself. And there are lots of rules here around like how things are judged, what's required for a submission, like Mothership licensing, and what types of entries. So this is probably like the most interesting part, I think. So of course, you can imagine there's going to be adventures, but you can also submit tool sets as well. So if you're looking at creating maybe new mechanisms or rule sets that can be added to a Warden's arsenal for a specific event or action, as well as setting guides. So if it's a bit more of like, I see this a bit more as like world building, but also, yeah, we've got horrific creatures, mind-breaking realities. And so that gives you an opportunity to be a bit more abstract rather than having to create some adventure. It's like, okay, here's a world or here are some enemies or whatever. So yeah. So it's not just about creating a one shot like up here. You can actually create these other things as well. As you can imagine, no AI, which is pretty consistent within Mothership. What else? And there's lots of resources here. So Lionheart, who creates or basically organizes the jam, releases things himself, and there has his own Discord for the tech jam, and you can find lots of things in there. And there's lots of guidance about like writing a first trifold, and there's some examples. There's also examples from previous jams here, and also, of course, some other resources around like getting art assets and things like this. But there'll be lots of different things that you could potentially do, whether it's writing like an adventure, whether it's just doing layout for an adventure, whether it's doing editing, whether it's doing like creating something different as well, whether it's like creating like the digital assets that go along an adventure. So whether it's like map layouts, there's also things that you could do in regards to like doing voice recordings for maybe there's like a warning or something that happens within the adventure. So that's another opportunity that you might want to put your hands to do. So there's going to be some tasks that will be a lot smaller than going, oh, I have to create this massive adventure all by myself. There may be opportunities to do some of the smaller collaborations as well. So yeah, theme TBA. So the theme, I believe, if I remember correctly, they were in their own Discord. They were doing some votes for it. And I think it was getting whittled down to about a list of 10. And then, between the judges, they were going to choose one. So that is the current state of where the theme is. So I guess on April 18th, you'll definitely know the theme, and you'll be able to figure out, okay, what are some ideas that you might do. But yeah, I welcome you guys checking that out. And so that is a Triptech Game Jam 3. And yeah, definitely check out the first 2 jams and what came out of it. Some really cool stuff came out of it, and some stuff that you'll no doubt recognize as well. And then another opportunity that I was just looking through, because Itch has tons of game jams and things like this. And so this kind of cool one that I found, that I came across, was this one, which is called Table Jam 26. And this starts actually in a few days. And Table Jam is a lot smaller than, I would say, what's required for a submission for the Triptech Game Jam. And instead, the goal of this jam is to create a random table, or a few, for tabletop role-playing games. Your table can be designed for any existing RPG system, made for your own original system, fully system agnostic, or compatible with multiple systems. And so the only core requirement is that random generation is central to the design. So the table should meaningfully support play, prep, inspiration, world building, encounters, combat, NPCs or PCs, items, events, locations, factions, and whatever else that can be generated. And probably my favorite line is this last one here. This jam celebrates the power of rolling and possibly trolling, that's up to you, on a table and discovering something unexpected. So, to be honest, I think this is a great place to, if you ever want to like dip your feet in to, or dip your toe in, I should say, into like creating something. I think I will probably create a few tables. I think that would be quite fun to do. In this jam, you have submission through Itch and things like this, and this jam is just for fun. So Triptech Jam does have a judging aspect and things like this, but yeah, here no judging, no rankings, no prizes, and everyone who submits will be announced as a winner, which is fun. So, and the goal is just to do stuff. So I think this is a great low barrier of entry jam if you're just interested of going, okay, well, I just want to practice submitting something and seeing how hard that is, then this is a good option here as well. And like I said, I think I'll probably do that, and I'm looking, if people are interested in collaborating on a table, then I'd be very much open to it as well. So I think that's a cool thing too. So that is coming up starting in a few days, so I better write that on my calendar, otherwise I'll forget. And yeah, start having a look. Okay, so that is Triptech and Table Jam. Okay, so I've got a couple of interesting finds that I found. Basically, this is my way of saying things that I hadn't come across before, or maybe had slipped through the thing. Peter says, I'm leaning into the Dead Planet style, derelict ship generator style of a larger group roll numbers and getting more specific as you move across it. Leaning in. So, is this what you're thinking of creating? Something like this? Is that right? I'm leaning into the Dead Planet style, derelict ship generator style of larger grouped roll numbers. Huh? Getting more. Oh, okay. Right. I think have I seen something like that? Trying to remember if I've seen some interesting like derelict generators. So there's a derelict generator in Managing the Expendables, which Windblown Vagrant created along with a few others. And then there was another one that was like just rolling dice, and then the value of the dice determined what things were in what parts of the ship. tables 1 through 20 is X, 21 through 40 is Y, then 1 through 10 is A, and okay, so there's like kind of like groupings going on. I'd be interested to see what your idea around this is, Peter. It would be kind of cool to get this a better idea from what you're talking about. Where, yeah, it would be kind of cool. Like, is there like an example of like if you were to go through those roles, like how that would pan out? So, for example, if you rolled like a 16, which is X, and then do you use 16 for also B as well, or is it like a different role? How does that work? But yeah, sounds really interesting. Sounds really cool. I'd be curious about how that would work out. And is this your idea for contributing and submitting something to like the Triptech game jam, or was this for something else, Peter? Because I think this is like kind of cool because like derelict ships, they can be a great to have and great thing to create, especially on the fly. Like if you're preparing for a session and you don't really want to do something like if you want to homebrew something, then generating derelicts is really, really great and really, really useful for people. Determining like how big the ship is, determining what parts of the ship, what components the ship has, what rooms it has, even down to like what enemies it has, what types of horror it might even have, and then also what people might even need. So, what their objectives might be. Okay, so Peter says, sure, say 16, it's a volcanic planet. You can roll again to see how many settlements there are, or read it straight across from everything in one roll. For the table gem. Oh, cool. Yeah, we should talk about that. Maybe. I'd be interested. So you're sort of talking about having like a set, like a table that has many columns, and depending on what you roll, you might have like you said, volcanic planet, and then you roll again to see how many settlements, and then roll again, and it's sort of like a world building, like generator type. I like that. That's cool. That's very cool. Yeah, that'd be quite fun. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that more. Okay. So something else that I came across was this standard acquisition modules, which is by Lofty Jungle. And so this is kind of cool because this is something that would be quite fun. Like if you just want something to like freshen up like a campaign or something like this where your players come across something. Yes, that's cool. That's a cool idea as well, Peter. So the blurb here is tired of static, predictable shops exactly where your players expected them? Introduce your crew to the Standardized Acquisition Module, or SAM. The vending device that turns mundane item acquisition into a literal roll of the dice. The SAM isn't just a micro-store. Seeing the blinking lights of a distant SAM is an invitation to discover an untouched boon, or even a hackable backdoor into a nearby fleet's poorly secured comms network. Wherever you find abandoned and derelict facilities, chances are you'll find a SAM. They can be found flickering alone on unpopulated moons, tucked into the dusty corners of forgotten space stations, or wedged under the stairs in the cargo bay of a dead freighter. SAMs are everywhere that SAMs are everywhere that you'll never think of looking for them. From vital food and meds to high-end gear, SAM may have just what you need. So yeah, the Standard Acquisition Modules is a vending machine trifold aimed specifically at Mothership, First Edition Wardens and players. And on the side here, yeah, so it has this little blurb here as well. The crew finds a SAM vending kiosk that appears to be glitched and filled with tools. And so you can see it's like a 1d10 table here with, like, in this case, this category is food and meds. And yeah, and I'm sure there's like tons more about, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. So it talks about like the capacity of the vending machine and also the condition and also how many items per category that it has. So it might be fully operational or it might be jammed, hackable, locked down, low on power, AI powered, faction locked, or glitched. And so I guess you could take advantage of that sort of thing. Yes, hack it, of course. But yeah, it sounds kind of fun. Like if you're looking just to, especially if your players are at a station or somewhere that it might be a good idea to give them a few things, then this could be like a fun way to introduce like a place that they could buy things, but not necessarily have to go into a particular shop. So there's a bit of like a lottery of what happens as well. But yeah, I thought this sounded really, really fun. I noticed that this was actually also from another game jam. So this is from the Sci-Fi Derelict Jam 2025. And yeah, it's like a little cheap module and quite fun. And a lot of the comments are like that it's a good thing to have. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, what was the second thing here? The second thing was over here was this, which was a game called Lost Mark. It's an adventure. It is a free or pay what you want 3 to 4 hour one shot for Mothership. It includes assets, handouts, etc. Your crew, I'll zoom in a little bit. It's a little bit small. Your crew drops out of the jump beside the patchwork ship of the lost, orbiting a hungry micro black hole. In 4 hours, it all collapses. Will you stop Mark Apollo's ascension or let it happen? So yeah, this is kind of like a little bit of fun. I saw this because on the Mothership Discord, they had mentioned that they created like an EPUB version. So if you're reading on like an ebook reader, they have a version for that, which I thought was quite cool. And they have some interesting assets. So they've got some BTT assets plus a soundtrack and timer and also an in-universe terminal. So it's kind of cool that they put this together. But yeah, it would be worth checking this out. Something that's quite small. And like I mentioned, it's a pay what you want as well. So that could be quite fun to at least check out and have a look. Why is that? Oh, that's... Sorry, I'm just confused by some notifications. Cool. The next thing on the agenda was a bit about the community. So we held our weekly community meetup on Sunday, and we had a few people, which was really cool. If people were interested in like showcasing what they're working on, or even something that they've completed, the meetups, I should spell that correctly, those meetups, an opportunity for that and to meet others in the community. So I'm hoping that if it works out well in terms of timing, is that Windblown Vagrant can show off a bit about Heats Crawling the Void. That could be quite cool to see how it works and understand the mechanics more than I can explain. But yeah, it sounds really cool. And also another cool thing is also the game jams that are coming up. And it's really cool to see people interested in those and wanting to like contribute something or at least collaborate. So yeah, that's been really cool and really great to see people, wanting to sort of get out there and submit some stuff. So that's been really, really awesome. And also, I think during the week, we had our first hyperspace raider join. So keep an eye out in terms of demographics. So one thing that I wanted to look at a little bit was around house rules. So earlier today, I put in like a note of like, what are some house rules that people use? And some things that came up were these, and I'd be interested to know if you had some of your own house rules. So if you didn't see that on the Discord, then type in a couple of like house rules that you've either used, want to use, or heard about and didn't want to use. So there are a few, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit because I think it'd be interesting to share what people do with their own house rules and how they run their games. I know that Sam, who's really active in our community, has, for his particular campaign, is trying out a whole lot of different house rules, that a couple that are mentioned here. And yeah, it's really cool to hear how people are like trying things and sort of messing with the probabilities of things, as well as just changing how the game works, whether it's to be a little bit fairer on the players or make it a little bit harder on the players. And or even if it's just something specific that you want to try and see if it like breaks things. But yeah, all good, Peter. Have a good one. I know it's really late for you, so thanks for joining in and thanks for chatting away as well. We'll have a chat about those tables. So the first thing I wanted to sort of talk about is like on crit successes. So personally, a crit success is a great opportunity just to like relieve one's stress. I think that's a great way to do things, especially if it is a save. So if you're rolling like a sanity save, then rolling critical and a critical success on that, because usually your stats are often a little bit lower than your saves, is that then, and that's a great way to sort of go, okay, well, you don't feel, you feel okay in this situation. And of course, it's a great opportunity for role play as well. Like, why do you feel good? Or the inverse is that, say, for example, because of what has happened in the game, and if a character role plays something and it kind of like makes sense that they do feel some sort of alleviation of stress, is that whether it's to do with the role or not, is that that's a mechanical way that you can reward that role play to make it, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. I like how they did that and how your character handled that moment, and then you could give them like, allow them to remove one stress as well. And then Barney mentioned one that he'd heard about in terms of like that as a result of the crit success is winning some sort of like a move forward. So in my mind, I guess this is like some sort of like progression, which makes sense. Like if this is outside of combat, especially, then if it is going towards some sort of like puzzle or some sort of way of like trying to figure out something, trying to fix something in particular, then this is a good opportunity. If you crit success something that, in this case, is that it's almost like you finish it twice as fast, or you sort of push forward at an advance quite quickly as a result of some sort of crit success. Yeah, another one that often gets talked about, so I think I mentioned this on stream because it's like a recommended in the Warden's operations manual, which is around armor degradation. So yeah, there's a couple of ones here. One that I mentioned is the idea of armor degradation rather than having it broken or destroyed. So just general. So once the sort of the core rules is that it's a person or the person who's wearing the armor receives damage more than the armor points of that armor, then that armor is effectively broken, which I don't really like the idea of. And I'd rather that, okay, well, you still have some armor, especially with, in some cases, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, especially if they've only been hit with like one bullet, then it really doesn't make much sense to me. Sam suggested here, AP is reduced by a D10 when damaged rather than outright broken. So depending on how much AP it has. So I'm not too sure if that is like if you'd still roll a D10 if the AP was only 5 for that thing. But I do like that where there is a chance of it being somewhat not so useful. I think that's kind of cool. I think another idea that I haven't tested which is more to do with the damage. So if you say, for example, you have AP 5 and you receive 8 damage, is that not only do you remove like 5 health points from you, but also that carryover, that extra 3 also gets removed from the armor. So then the armor goes from 5 to 2, and doing it in that particular way. So it doesn't really force you to like roll again. You can still calculate it from what's already been rolled, but it also doesn't mean that the armor is, for lack of a better way of putting it, it's just like broken or popped, where it's like, okay, well, now it's completely useless. So I think I will probably test that in game coming up. I would like to, where it's more that carryover damage. Whatever goes onto your health would also goes there. Oh, Ego mod, yeah. So in terms of parts, I think it kind of depends. I think for me, I would probably stay away from armor parts, but I know that people really like to get into those details where it's like, okay, well, this is just the torso, and okay, what about like the back or the sleeves or whatever it might be most appropriate for that armor. So in that idea, let's say if like we arbitrarily carved up the armor into 4 different parts, depending on what that armor was, because I'm sure you could get armors of like different types. But let's say if it was like, okay, it was just like the top half, you have front, back, sleeves, and each of them could only have, if it was AP 10 total, let's say AP 8 for ease, AP 8 total, then, or you could go AP 10 and go 3 on the front, 3 on the back, 2 on the sleeves. I like one aspect of it where it's just like, okay, that makes it a bit more like a simulation. Like it does feel like, okay, well, as a result, it hits you in the arm or whatever, and then that piece of the armor is gone and you receive like the rest of the damage to that part. But then you now, instead of just tracking one armor stat, you're really tracking a few. So I probably wouldn't run it, but I'm pretty sure that there would be people who would, because there's lots of TTRPGs that obviously include those things where it's like, it even talks about like what part of the body is struck and therefore what armor is protecting it and therefore how much damage is actually done, etc. So, but as a result, every time that you're doing that, I believe, is that you'd end up just creating like an extra roll or some extra decisions or some extra calculations that you have to make. So personally, I wouldn't be that interested in doing that, but I'd be happy if someone wants to run it and play it and do it, then that would be kind of cool. Have the injury system decide where the armor gets damaged. Yeah, that's a good point. Like in terms of like injury system, you mean in terms of wounds here? Because I think that would work probably for some of like the minor wounds. I think that would be fine. And then of course, like once you have those like the more severe wounds, then I guess that might be a bit trickier. Perhaps. But yeah, it's interesting. I think people have a lot of like different preferences here around AP, but I think most people I've spoken to in the Mothership community is that just doing any damage that is above the armor and it gets popped, then like it doesn't really feel that fair. But also, of course, it is very easy to play. It's very like you instantly know the result, like what happens. If you get damage of 9, you know what happens. If you get damage of 11, what happens. Like it's very, very easy. And I think that may be the reason why they went that way in terms of that ruling. But yeah. What else? So something about like cover. So Sam mentioned cover is just the same all the time. I know the Mothership rules, there are like partial cover, which is like AP5 or something. And so in this case, it's just like AP10, don't worry about it. And yeah, I'm sure there are some situations where, depending on the environment, you might want to like change that up. I think personally, I'd be quite happy to talk about whether something is partial cover or not. Like if you are, I keep thinking of like wooden furniture, but I think with the environment, that would be worth keeping in mind, like what does constitute as like the cover in this case. Like, of course, like if you're around the corner or whatever, then of course it would be like either obstructed, I guess, or like unable to be shot. I'm trying to think of like some partial cover situations, because of course, like you use that a lot in turn-based combat games. Like if you have played, like I used to play a lot of Shadowrun, and that was like a lot of their video games that came out about 10 years ago. A lot of that was turn-based combat, and you had partial cover, and the partial cover was like behind sort of like, seemed to be more like wooden structures or things that you can go through, and of course door. Yeah, the table turns sideways, I think, like yeah, it's almost like you're starting to talk about what the material is made, what the table's made from. So I can see why Sam might want to go for like, okay, it's 10 AP flat. Yeah. But yeah, I think generally the way that I've run it is that I'm quite happy to talk about what that looks like, and then think about, okay, well, what makes sense in terms of how much, whether this is partial or full, or, and also, I guess, the material. I haven't had too many situations where I've had like really tactical combat either. So yeah, we'll see how that pans out for me, I think. Then we have, so some advantage and disadvantage. So advantage, disadvantage rolls is the tens dice only. So how would this work? So instead of rolling 2, you roll 1. And so let's say you rolled a, so on advantage, you only roll, okay, so you'd roll 1 pair, and then you'd roll just 1 tens die. So really you're rolling 3 dice rather than 2 pairs. And then the tens die, so let's say you roll 62 on 1 die, and then you would roll like a 32 on the other. And so really it's 3 dice and things like that. Yeah, the real question is, what is the AP of a human shield? That's quite true. I guess it depends on what they're wearing. Are they wearing advanced battle dress? I'm sure if players had the choice, I'm sure they would be going for that. It's like, oh yeah, they've got advanced battle dress. Sure, of course they do. Unbroken as well. The armor wasn't broken, and that's not how they died. Yeah. That's a good point. I think that's something that needs to be looked at. Yeah. Wouldn't that be quite morbid as like something in a TTRPG, is that they actually have like the AP for a human shield? But yeah. So going back to the advantages, disadvantages, I don't mind this. I think it's fine. I think you're saving yourself rolling 1 die. And I guess it's like a tiny bit faster in calculating advantage versus disadvantage. You're not looking at it and trying to decide 2 different numbers. You're just deciding like 2 tens and whatever the ones might be. Yeah, I kind of like it. obviously you're not going to have many. You would have, if you were to do this digitally, you would have to have a dice roller where you can just choose what dice you pick up. Whereas through like the companion app, you couldn't do that by yourself. Or you could do it, but then you'd be just excluding one of the numbers, whatever. I'm starting to worry about your game's ego unwarned. 100%. I've had players vote to feed each other to the horror. Human shields are well on the table. Yeah. I think it wouldn't be a Mothership. What? You wouldn't have been a Mothership player until you've come across situations where you've had to make some clearly ethically questionable decisions around who survives and for those and what to do with the perished PC bodies as well. Yeah. It wouldn't be a Mothership game without that. That's for sure. Trying to think of like I think this is nowhere close to this, but we've had, I think I remember playing Epsilon 14 and then someone getting infected from Dr. Giovanni and then just locking them. I think locking them on the and I think like putting an explosive on the airlock so then like they could not get back into the station as a result. They chose to slip, no roll, and die sometimes for the plot. Yeah. And that's the key thing, right? Is that if you're collaborating on a fun story, then that's the best. Yeah, for sure. That's the best thing. That's so much fun. And like if you can create, as a warden, even create the opportunity for that to happen is fantastic. And that's what you really want. You want those moments, right? Those moments where they're either just so ridiculous or they're so amazing that they turned out that way. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Okay. Then, yeah, one thing that I've mentioned previously is that like players voluntarily, I should spell that right, voluntarily taking on stress. So of course, this is kind of like a bit different from games. Personally, as a player and a warden, I quite like that because as a player, I'm embodying this character and I think this character would be in a stressful situation. I think that's fine. As a warden, of course, like if you have players who haven't played TTRPGs before, and even if they have, is going, okay, well, just encouraging them to go, okay, well, this is your character. This is you. You're contributing to the story. And also, you know your character best. And you can say that, okay, well, this would be a very stressful situation for them. And sometimes it might be just that the warden forgets. It's like, oh, well, you walk into this room and there's a dead body. It's like, well, yeah, I've been in that situation before. So, yeah. Stress is used as a roll over floor. So if stress is 9, must roll over 9 and under the stat to succeed. Okay, so it sounds like Sam has flipped that, because if you roll under stress normally, that is when you take on the... Is that right? Yes. If you panic roll under your stress, then you take on that condition. Yeah, exactly. That's a great question too. Yeah. Is this the first time you've seen a body? Tell me about it. Yeah, I think that's really great. And I think that really works well for characters who are classes of obviously like Teamster and Scientist. I kind of have a little bit of trouble when people who are Marines, they're just like, in many cases, they're just like hardened Marines. It's like, oh yeah, I've seen tons of dead bodies. And I kind of struggle because there's a little bit of like tension there for me where I think, are they kind of like cheesing the system a little bit? Of course, stress and the stress mechanic is like really key for the, what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's really key for like making the mission like more and more dangerous for them and for things to get more and more out of hand. But if they're just like, oh, I've seen dead bodies all the time, it's like, It's fine, no problem. So yeah, I kind of, like I said, like that kind of like grinds up against me when people say that, like where they're just like, I'm hardened soldier. But hopefully people can sort of also understand that it's a key part of the mechanics of the game, that they just don't say, I'm immune to seeing dead bodies all the time. So, yeah. Or you can just give them a really grim description and then see if they can still argue out of that, of being something that they don't care. If a hardened Marine confesses about a story they've seen a dead body before, I rule the time that they take to tell the story as the amount of time the character has been. I like that. That's great. Yeah, they're just paralyzed with the memory of that first dead body or whatever it might be. I like that. It's quite fun. It kind of reminds me of, there's a clip that I've seen recently, and it's between Matthew Mercer and I was just watching something with him on before and completely blanked on his name. But they were talking about like people just going and like creating stories and contributing to that story, and like saying, oh well, there's a well in the middle of town, and then a player will go, oh well, I go and look into the well, and then the person just keeps going and talks about how they find gold or something like this, and then of course, like it's just like, yes, you find gold, but then also after about 3 or 4 minutes, you find yourself that you're just daydreaming the whole time, and you've jumped down the well and you're just like in a pile of mud or whatever. And so just allowing them that, yes, you can do joint storytelling, but if it does get out of hand, then okay, well actually here are some repercussions for going a little bit too fast that are in the story, rather than you just going as a warden or game master or whatever, just going, no, you can't really do that. It's more like, okay, well, here's kind of like a tap on the shoulder going, no, that's a bit too far. So I quite liked that. Yeah. So yeah, panic tests are D10 roll over rather than instead of D20. So this changes the mechanic a little bit. So of course with a D20, you have a 1 in 20 chance to roll anything on the die. And instead, these two things are from Sam. So these two things work together. So what ends up happening with 2d10, of course, they average out and you end up getting a lot of values that are towards 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, somewhere in that range, instead of having a higher chance of getting stuff that is 20. Being 1 in 20, it's probably a lot less. And so instead, with that and the next rule, which talks about every time character does panic, then that panic is noted. So he calls it here a pip on their character sheet. And then the number of pips combined with that result, that 2d10 result, is now the sum that gets compared against the panic table. And so the example here that he gives, a player has 3 panic pips and 7 stress. They roll 6 on the 2d10, failing their roll because they've added the 3 pips to the 6, meaning that they apply the panic result of 9. And of course, as a reminder here, that you're rolling over in this case. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. I quite like how Sam has done this. We had a bit of a discussion about how this works and what effect like 2d10 or 2d5 what would that do for some of the other tables. One that I suggested was 2d5 on the wound table, but yeah, I think Sam talked me out of that one because you'll get a lot of injuries that are around 5, of course, and then rather than being like a random chance that you could actually have a heart attack or whatever. Doesn't that get players to the 20 heart attacks so much faster in a cascading failure event? Yeah, if you do end up with a cascading failure event, yeah, there's a good chance of it happening. But I think also his table, and Sam will have to correct me here, is that I have a feeling that, of course, his table isn't 1 through 20 because it isn't a possible value. However, I think it goes from 2 to 25 or something like this. And so then the heart attack is not just 20, it actually gets pushed out a little bit more. And he's added a few more conditions in there. So it's not quite just using the same table. I should have mentioned that. But it's a good point, is that it does, over time, it will push up those values. And yeah, if you get some sort of cascading failure, that would be super bad news. But I don't think it's the way that he's done it in terms of the table plus the pips plus this rollover thing, then it like changes a little bit. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm not too sure if Sam's still able to answer, but if I remember correctly, we did talk about it a few weeks ago. So I think it's like a 2 through 25 table. So as you can tell, like there are values that you would just not even get close to, and things do have to get quite out of hand anyway to even get yourself up there, because you already have to, like, say if you don't fail any panic rolls, then there's no way of actually you getting to some of those values at all. Oh, there you go. Sam, we've got his attention. Correct on the table range. 1 point of clarification. The pips don't come into play until after the panic test has failed. So in my example, the character failed because they rolled a 7 over a 6. The sum indicates that player has 3 panic pips, so they have those things. They always get added, and 7 stress. So that's the stress, like that's the marker for what they need to roll over. That's the value. If it rolls over, that's a failure. They roll 6 on the D20, or 2D20, right? Failing their roll because it's the roll. The 6 is under. Right, okay, yeah, okay. So then, like, yeah, you got the 6. So the 6 gets compared to the stress, but then choosing what the panic result is for this, for the condition resolves into a 9. Yeah. I think when we talked about it the first time, I got a little bit confused, Sam. So I will leave you to explain it how you wish. But the general idea, like, of the whole mechanic is that it's 2d10 instead of just d20. So then there isn't an equal chance of someone getting a 1 or a 20. You end up getting a sort of like a normal distribution towards the center. And then based on multiple failed rolls, failed panic tests, is that then that curve just gets pushed like to the right, and you end up with worsening conditions. And then also, of course, with some conditions not even being possible. There was a gradient descent encounter where an android next to the teamster haunted by a ghost resulted in the teamster getting 6 stress and panicking twice. Wow. That's, yeah, not ideal. That is for sure. Yeah. There are definitely some like responses that can get really out of hand very quickly. But yeah, I thought I would talk about some house rules, and thank you for people throwing some stuff into the Discord, and thanks for people chatting. Thanks for chatting, Sam and Ego Unmoored. And we had Peter earlier, and we had Strand, and we had Raphael, and who did I miss? Did I miss them? That was it. 5 today. But yeah, so to give you context, Sam has got like a really cool campaign going on. So I urge you to hit him up. I think some of the materials for his campaign are in the home channel of the Discord community. So if I remember correctly, they are like the first set of resources that someone put in there. So If you scroll all the way to the top, you'll be able to find them easily if you're curious about what that campaign is about. It's a cool idea. But yeah, that's everything that I had for today. So unless there are some other questions, then I think I will escape. My light is fading a little bit just because it's a bit cloudy here and it is getting a little bit late. But yeah, it was a pleasure to see everyone. You're all good, Strand. There's no problem. You're allowed to use the stream as a podcast. That's totally fine. There's no problem. Yeah, you did some really cool art that I saw that Barney put onto his Warden screen. So that's really, really cool. So yeah, don't apologize at all, Strand. It is totally fine. Yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Don't forget, if you are keen to come to the meetup on Sunday, the event should be in the Discord server as well. Hopefully I can give a bit more details about those and make it more than just a few of us hanging out. Make it that, okay, here is something that you can actually come for, have a bit of a topic, and also have a little bit of time. If people do want to hang out, they can. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. And very nice to talk to you all. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it a lot. And have a good one, guys. See you later.